Buenas tardes, son las 12, es el miércoles, it's 12 o'clock, it's Wednesday, so it's time for our second Community Spanish of this week, broadcasting live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 12. We also have our kids programs every day, children's Spanish at 11 and children's French at 10:30. So we have pretty much multiple videos coming to you every day. Feel free to check out all the videos on our Facebook page, but also on our Facebook Live webpage on our website, where we have all the videos uploaded and also some extra worksheets for you to practice some more with some of the things you're learning in the videos. You can also let us know on either our Facebook page or our Facebook Live webpage. You can let us know if you have any requests about topics for us to teach, and we'll be happy to share information on the things that interest you the most. Please like, comment, and share on the videos. That way we know what you're enjoying, and we can see how you all are interacting with our videos, and hopefully you're finding them helpful and informative. And also one other little plug I want to give is that we actually have a new special on Groupon going. So if you want to take one of our 6-week online beginner language classes, so that's the intro 1 level, we have a new deal going on with Groupon. So please feel free to check that out. It's a honestly quite big discount. So I don't miss this opportunity to check that out and get started on your language learning, from the very bottom. So that's available on the Groupon website. So without further ado, let's get started. Today we're going to be talking about this, they're called the a personal, or the personal a in Spanish. Now, this thing is honestly very hard to translate into English because it just doesn't exist. So there's not even a good really term for this, but I'm going to explain a little bit more what I'm talking about when I say the personal a. And of course, we're going to practice as always. So, so share my screen with you so you can see this material and hopefully follow along with me. So to give a little bit of background information about the personal a. So what it's talking about is just this one letter a when we're using it in a sentence, not just as a kind of alphabet letter, but in a sentence. It has a certain kind of a meaning, or I would say more it's a usage. It's not really a meaning because again, it doesn't mean something, but we have a certain way we must use it to speak Spanish in a correct way. So we can see, for example, we're explaining here that we use this before a person when this person is a direct object of a verb. And I'm pretty sure I've done another video on direct objects if you want to dig for that in the past videos. But basically it means like the person who directly receives the action of the sentence. So for example, if I say I hit the ball is the direct object because it receives the action of hitting. It's the thing that is hit. So basically what we're talking about in this context is when we are talking about a person that is the object of the verb. So the person is receiving the action. And again, usually this is a specific person. So this is kind of how we show someone, usually when we talk about them by name. And we can also use this in front of animals, but it's kind of in a particular case. And this is a little bit open to interpretation. It's kind of like how you view your animal. Like if you view it almost like a person or someone you have a relationship with, then you can use the a personal even for animals, but it's not a kind of one that you might use an a for in front of all animals. Okay, so it's a little bit open to interpretation, but mostly what we're talking about this in is the context of talking about people. So this is when we see this extra a is added right in front of a person when that person is receiving the action. So let's see some examples to see what this actually looks like in reality, because I know that sometimes talking about these things in theory, it's very confusing, but the examples really help clarify it for you. So if we look at the first example, we have yo veo a Juan en la calle. Okay, so saying I see John in the street. So if we think about this again, just from a grammar perspective for a second. So yo veo a Juan. So Juan is the direct object because he is the one that's receiving my action of seeing. Like he is the one that I am seeing. So he's the direct object. And so by this rule in Spanish, we have to add this a personal, a personal a, okay, in front of Juan. Okay. Now, normally we're used to seeing a in these kind of sentences when we're talking about like giving something to someone. Okay, so like I give a present to someone, or so this just to kind of clarify that this is again specific to a person, and so that's kind of the context we're seeing it in. So I know it's a little bit confusing because normally we think of the word a as meaning like to or at, but this is a very specific case that we're using this just for talking about people. And again, there is not really a translation for this because it doesn't exist in English. So it's not like we aren't saying I see to John or I see at John in the street. It just is I see John. It's just this is the way we have to say it in Spanish for it to be correct. So we have to add this extra a. Now, if you say yo veo Juan, yes, everyone's going to understand you, like they understand what you mean, but it's true that that is incorrect Spanish. You must have the a for it to be correct. So here's another example. Buscas a mi hermano. So you look for my brother. And again, this is a specific person. My brother is a specific person. So that's why we have to use this a in front of it. And it's the object, it's receiving the action of looking, the buscar. So that's why it's a direct object, and we must put the a. Another example here, we have ellos aman a sus padres. They love their parents. And again, their parents are specific people. So we must use a, and they are the ones that they love. So they're directly receiving this action of love. So that's why we must put this a. And one final example here in this group, quiero mucho a mi perro Simón. So I really love my dog Simón. So again, it's an animal, but in this case, because it's a specific one, and again, obviously you're saying you love them, so there is a certain kind of relationship between you and the dog. So we can use the personal a in this kind of case. So again, as I said in my other kind of little intro, that we might not use the a in all situations with animals, but it depends on what your relationship is with this animal. Okay, so in this case, it's a very close relationship, so they're gonna treat this dog almost like a person and use the a personal. So that's kind of a few examples to help illustrate better this point. Okay, so we have a few more notes just to share to help give them a little bit more background to understand this a little better. So next point we have is, so it says that the personal a can be seen as a sign of respect. Okay, again, this is kind of how we were distinguishing between people and things we just view as objects. So the example of contrast here, ella ve a Josefina, she sees Josefina, ella ve el coche de Josefina. So here's the distinction. When we say we're talking about Josefina's car, which is just an object to us, that we don't think about it as a person, so we don't need an a personal. But in the first one, ella ve a Josefina, because she sees Josefina. So we're drawing this kind of distinction between Josefina, a person, and Josefina's car, an object. Okay, so this is again trying to help show that kind of respect of a person. So now there's kind of a couple more notes. So remembering that where we want to place this word in the sentence or in the question. So if it's a question, we want to make sure that we put it in the front. As you know from other kinds of ways of making questions, if we have any kind of preposition like a or de or por, whichever one of those little words, those must go in the front of the question. And this a personal is no different. It's the same. So if we're going to use it in the question, it must go at the start. So for example, we have a quien amas, who do you love? Okay, and a quien miras, who are you looking at? Okay, so we have to put the a in the front, and then when we answer, we would say amo a and miro a. So we have the a personal in both the question and the answer. Now for the next little note here, we have just a reminder that if there's a series, like multiple direct objects, we have to repeat this personal a, okay, for each one. So veo a Juan, a Maria, y a Miguel. So we wouldn't say veo a Juan, Maria, y Miguel. We have to repeat it for each person in the list. Okay, now next a little reminder is about if we have a kind of a situation where the one after is el, that we know we have to make this contraction of a and el make al. So if you remember that from the contractions video I did, this would be familiar to you. So for example, veo al chico. So instead of saying veo a el chico, we veo al chico, we have our contraction. So just keeping in mind these rules that we already know about when we have this a and el, we have to make a contraction. Now, there's a couple of exceptions when we don't need to put the a personal. So here, we're going to highlight them in this part here. So for example, for these three verbs, you have ser, tener, and hay, that we don't need to use the personal a. So for example, we said Juan es profesor. So this one we don't use it because we use the person a to distinguish people and specific people. So if we say he's a teacher, we're talking about teacher as kind of a general category of profession. So we're not really speaking about like a specific person. I know we said Juan, but again, in our use of this word profesor, we're not saying like Professor Juan, we're saying Juan is this profession. And so again, the profession, we're not really thinking about it as a specific person. So that's why we would say Juan es profesor without a personal a. So that's what example with ser. Now, if we say tienes dos hermanas, so if we're talking about these people, but we're talking about them like they are objects. Again, we're just saying you have two sisters. It's kind of a fact of possession. Okay, you have two sisters, you have a brother, you have a friend. We would not use an a personal in those cases because again, we're talking about these people, but we're talking about them almost like objects, like just something that you have or you don't have. So we also don't use it in this case like with tener. And the last one we say with hay is again a little bit of a special exception. Hay niños en el jardín, so there are kids in the garden. Again, we're kind of just talking about them as objects. We're saying like there are kids in the garden. There are those like objects there, like in the same way that we would say like there are flowers in the garden or there are birds in the garden. Again, we're kind of just talking about them as in an object sense. And that's why we're not really focusing on using the a personal. Again, the a personal, if you can kind of take away one thing from this lesson, is to emphasize the humanity of someone, of a specific person. Okay, so now just to kind of as a contrast to this example as I was just talking about, we have the last point here. So saying you don't use it when the a personal, we don't use the a personal when the direct object is an unspecified person. Again, if we're talking about like a general category of things, like this first example, necesito una secretaria nueva. I need a new secretary. Again, we're talking about that as a kind of general group of, again, a profession. We're not speaking about like this secretary, like my secretary Veronica, for example, but we're talking about it as a general profession, a general group. So again, we're speaking about it almost in an object sense, less of a person, again, a specific person. And the same case for the last one. Mario busca amigos en España. So Mario looks for friends in Spain. So again, we're not talking about a specific friends. It's just like his specific friend Bruno. It's just like he's looking for friends as a general category. So that's why we're not using the a personal in these cases. So I hope that helps to kind of illustrate a little bit better the difference and when we use the a personal and when we don't. So again, I know this can be a tricky concept because this doesn't exist in English, just period, doesn't. So it can be a little bit difficult to wrap your mind around. But again, in general, what the focus is if you're speaking about a specific person, then you should use the a personal. That's be our general rule of thumb is if you're speaking about a specific person, use it. If it's not, or if you're treating them like an object, then don't use it. That's kind of in general the way it works. So let's do a few examples, and then I'm going to be posting another exercise onto the website. So if you want to practice even more with this, there'll be more resources for you to check out. So, but let's do one exercise together. Feel free to write in the comments for your responses and see if this is making sense to you. So let's try. So número uno, yo veo, and then we have mi hijo en la casa. So we have to choose if we need to put a in the blank, or if we don't need to put anything in the blank, then we should put an X. This is our instructions for this exercise. So we're choosing about if we're going to put a or nothing. So this one we have yo veo, and then we have mi hijo. So again, our question we should ask ourselves is, are we talking about a specific person? So if I say mi hijo, my son, is that specific? Yes, it is. So if it's specific, that means that we should use a personal. So yo veo a mi hijo en la casa. Again, because your son is a specific person, so we should use the personal a. Número dos, tú ves blank la película nueva de Leonardo DiCaprio. So you see the new movie of Leonardo DiCaprio. So if we're asking ourselves, the new movie, is that a specific person? No. So nothing needed. So we're gonna put an X. That's what we show when there should be nothing in the blank. So there's an X. Okay, so, muy bien, let's try número 3. So, tu hermana quiere blank su novio. Okay, so your sister loves, and then su novio, her boyfriend. Okay, so again, we ask ourselves, is that a specific person? Yes, right? Her boyfriend is a specific person. So we should use the a personal. So, tu hermana quiere a su novio. Okay, número 4. En la oficina hay blank, un nuevo empleado. So in the office, there is a new employee. Okay, so we think about back to the rules we spoke about before, those 3 verbs where we don't use the a personal, that we had ser, tener, and hay. So I is in this group, so we know that we should not use it. And again, in this kind of context, we know there's a new employee, and yes, the employee is a person, but we're not really speaking about them in a personal way. We're just talking about them like kind of almost like an object. Again, like if you went to the office and you looked around, what you would see besides desks and chairs is you'd see a new employee. So again, we're kind of talking about them in an object sort of way. Okay, número 5. Tú tienes, okay, I mean, 2 perros y un gato. Okay, so this one is we have to make a decision about how we're going to treat the dos perros y un gato. So in this case, I would say, because we are just talking about them like a matter of possession, okay, right? And because again, we in our list of those 3 verbs with which we don't use the personal a, tener is in that group. So we know even just from that kind of standard rule. But again, if we think about the context of this, we're not really talking about them in their like in a relationship sense or a human sense, just more of a matter of possessions. Like you just have them. They're objects in this sense. So we want no personal a. So tú tienes 2 perros y un gato. Okay, we're over halfway there. We have 4 more to go. So we have buscan and su primo. So they, or if it's ustedes, maybe you all are looking for their cousin, okay, or your all cousin, okay. So su primo, again, we ask ourselves, is this a specific person or not specific? It's specific. Su primo is a specific person. If we just said they're looking for like a cousin, then it wouldn't be specific. But this is a specific primo, so we should use the a personal. Buscan a su primo. Now, next one, we have another one with buscar, but a little bit of a different context. So we have busco y mi zapato, okay? So let's think about this one. So zapato, is this a specific person? A zapato? Zapato is a shoe. So no, not a person. So we don't need to worry about the a personal. So we should put nothing here. Busco mi zapato. All right, 2 more to go. Número 8. Sofía es, and we have blank, la directora de la escuela. So this one, again, with ser, we talked about, these are ones that don't use the a personal. Okay, so this sentence is just right as it is. So we have Sofía es la directora de la escuela. Okay, or we could say Sofía es, if we're going to talk about her profession in general. Sofía es directora de una escuela, okay, as a general group. But again, the same thing, so no a. Okay, now last one, número 9, we have entiendo and then José. So again, we ask ourselves, is José a specific person? Yes, okay. So, and he is the one that I understand, so it's a direct object relationship in terms of the grammar. So we should use a. Entiendo a José. Okay, so those are some different examples how we can see how we either use or don't use. And again, so just to kind of recap, we're using this a personal before direct objects that are people, specific people. And so if it's not a specific person, or if we're not talking about them in the context of being a specific person, then we shouldn't use it. Okay, so I know these rules are a little bit tricky, but hopefully I've helped to clarify a little bit of them today. I definitely be posting more practice on the website, as I mentioned. So if you wanted to spend a little bit more time working on these concepts, you're welcome to do that. Also welcome to rewatch the video if you need to kind of go through things again. It will be on the Facebook, and then it will eventually make its way to our YouTube page as well. So you can check it out there permanently. So muchas gracias. I'll be back next on Friday at 12 for our third and final Community Spanish for this week. But in the meantime, please stay tuned for the kids programming. We have, again, Kids French coming up tomorrow morning at 10:30 and Kids Spanish coming up tomorrow morning at 11. So there's still plenty of stuff to catch every day. Gracias y adiós.